Welcome everybody to this session. We have a very exciting session here because we're going to not only give some a presentation about the work on the topic, but we're also going to announce the winners of a hackathon that we've just had. So this will be breaking news, world-breaking news in this session, and you will be the first people to hear it. So I'd like to just make sure that you're all in the right session, that we're all here. This is the Leveraging Data Science and AI to Eradicate Modern Slavery. And there'll be two of us presenting in this session. There'll be me from QUT and also Adriana Bora, whose work this is. And so I just get the pleasure and honour of standing up here and being part of the great work that Adriana's been doing. So before we start, I think we should give Adriana a round of applause for all the great work that she's done for this session and also for the organising the hackathon that we'll talk about a little later. So we'll start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QUT now stands. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits, and we recognise that these lands have always been places of teaching, research and learning. So the agenda for this session is that we're going to first talk about Project AIMS, that's AI against modern slavery, and we're going to then talk about the hackathon. We'll then talk about the awards, and then we'll open the floor for discussion. So please, if you consider any questions on the way through, hold them till the end, and we can then have them as part of the final discussion. And if there's anybody online, then please submit your questions online in the chat. We have a few people here who will be collecting them. Thank you. Right, so I have done the great part of my job here, which is to do the introduction, and I'm now going to hand over to Adriana to talk about the Project AIMS. Over to you, Adriana.
Thank you, Kerrie. Thank you so much, Kerrie. And while Kerrie is very generous with her words, Kerrie has been my supervisor throughout this entire process, and this is the work that I've also developed as part of my PhD here at Queensland University of Technology and as part of the Centre for Data Science under her supervision. And we are wrapping everything up by the end of this month, so we're really excited to be able to share with all of you what we've been doing for the last couple of years. And if any of you were in the session here on Tuesday, the next 20 minutes will not be anything new for you, but I hope that afterwards you'll get some exciting content about the hackathon, just as we promised. But for the other ones that are hearing about this project for the first time, let me first start by providing you with a little bit of background. And to be able to explain what we're doing, it's very important to be able to understand what is modern slavery. Modern slavery is defined as a situation of exploitation that a person cannot refuse or leave due to threats, coercion, or abuse of power. It can take many forms, from forced labor, forced child labor, the use of children as soldiers, the trafficking of people for organs harvesting, people that are born in servitude, debt bondage, and, of course, forced marriages. And when we try to look at the statistics around this crime, there is an estimate that approximately 50 million people are in a situation of modern slavery in the world. And what is even more shocking is that since the later estimates of 2018, there has been an increase of 10 more million people. And what that tells us is that all the work that we have been doing to try to tackle this crime, in fact, is nowhere near fast enough to catch up with the speed to which this crime is evolving. So we need better solutions, and we need to leverage technology that will allow us to speed up all this great work. And living in Australia or in other developed countries, we tend to think that modern slavery is not something that ever happens here or that is nowhere in any way connected to us. But in fact, modern slavery happens in every country in the world. In Australia, there is an estimate of over 40,000 people that are in a situation of exploitation. And also, modern slavery touches our day-to-day life also through the products and services that we are consuming. The Global Slavery Index, led by the Walk Free Foundation here in Australia in the International Labour Organization, they are the ones that are putting the statistics as part of the Global Slavery Index, where they're not only measuring the prevalence of slavery, but they're also showing us the risk of different products that are imported in these large economies like Australia that are being developed being at risk of being developed with modern slavery. So if we are in Australia and consuming electronic, fish, garments, solar panel, or textile, we run a very high risk that they have been developed with people in a situation of modern slavery, and therefore the clothes that we have on our backs, the food maybe we have for lunch, or even the technology that is facilitating this conference could be at risk of being developed with people in slavery. So we are passive contributors without us knowing to this crime, and we would like to be able to be more intentional with our purchases or with our actions. So to be able to have that information, to make more informed choices, we need transparency. So we need to work with large corporations to create transparency in their supply chain, to ensure that they understand very well the products and services that they're offering, and to ensure that no people within their global supply chain are being exploited just for us to be able to have cheaper products. And this concept is not new. It doesn't apply only to modern slavery. It applies to human rights and environmental due diligence of corporations at large. And we have frameworks from the United Nations that are asking companies to create due diligence. And what due diligence means is a process where you start by identifying not only the risk that crimes or human rights abuses poses to your business, but the risk that your business poses to society. Once you do that, as a business, you need to take action to try to correct and mitigate for this risk. Then always track and measure the effectiveness of these actions. And finally, and what is important for us and for this purpose of this talk and the work, is to report back to stakeholders, those being consumers, as I explained, or investors or businesses of other governments. So not only that the company should do these processes, but they should be transparent about the outputs. And this UN framework of due diligence is embedded in a lot of national legislation. In fact, in 2015, so exactly 10 years ago, the UK passes the first Modern Slavery Act. It was a revolutionary piece of legislation at that point, asking really large corporations to publish annual statements, so one statement where they describe this process of identifying, assessing, measuring progress of risk of modern slavery, and publish this statement on their website. But being the first legislation, you can imagine that it had a lot of lobbying. So in fact, the law from its initial design to the version that actually passed was very diluted. So the last law that was passed, it only asked the companies to publish a statement on their website without clear mandatory requirements. They could say, we don't have slavery, thank you very much, but it has to be signed by the board and on their website. And that was the only requirement of the law. That means also that the government didn't have an obligation to go and check if all the companies that are in charge, are in scope of that law, are responding, because the philosophy of the final version of the law was that the consumer will be the one that every time they're trying to buy a product or to engage with a service, they'll try to figure out what is the parent company of that product, let's say that coffee, and then go to their website, try to find their Modern Slavery Act statement, read those statements, and then decide, okay, I think I'm fine, I'm going to buy this coffee now. So of course, that is not how things work, and that's why 10 years after, unfortunately, that law it still shows that not having enough teeth or a clear enforcement mechanism, it meant that it didn't have the change that was intended. So with all of this feedback from civic society and academia, Australia passes its own Modern Slavery Act in 2018. And the Australian government takes on this feedback and say, okay, well, we are going to ask really large corporations to publish statements, but we're going to give them clear mandatory criteria that they need to cover in their statements. And on top of having the statements on their website, they need to send it to a centralized registry of the government. So as a government, we can review them. And the reason why the Australian government has to review it is because they had to send a report to the parliament each year to explain how well this law is doing and how well the companies are responding. So we see already improvements in this regard, and last year Canada passed their own Modern Slavery Act with improvements since the Australian Modern Slavery Act. And beyond the laws that have in scope modern slavery, we see many, many other laws throughout the world that are pushing not only for companies to do due diligence on modern slavery, but also on human rights and environmental due diligence at large. But all of them have this element in common, which is that the company needs to publish reports. So that leaves us with a huge challenge. The fact that companies, of course, they're doing the right thing, they're publishing their reports, and unfortunately no government or NGO can go through thousands of documents each year, check if the company meets all these mandatory criteria or suggestions that the legislation has, and then take all that data and transform it into insights that then governments or consumers can act on and change behavior, which is ultimately what we want to see from companies that they're doing. So even if we've been having these laws, unfortunately, the fact that they haven't been properly enforced, it means that we have a lot of documents that companies are publishing, but nobody's looking at them, and therefore no actual change has happened to the level that it was expected. So we really believe that AI can help with this challenge. It can allow us to create scalable solutions that will enable us to have a more rigorous evaluation of compliance and ultimately contribute to a greater accountability and transparency from the private sector and contribute to a more robust climate for business and human rights and environment with some other legislation. And that was the philosophy behind starting this project in 2017. And this project, we call it Project AIMS, AI Against Modern Slavery, and it had two different phases. And in the first phase of this project, we focused on the UK Modern Slavery Act, and in the second phase, we focused on the Australian Modern Slavery Act. So now, I want to take you a little bit to the different stages of this project and tell you what we've learned, and then tell you what we were able to build based on these learnings. So the first phase of the project was developed by the Walk Free Foundation here in Australia and the Future Society, and with support from different stakeholders. And when we did this, 2018, 2019, we thought that we're going just to take all the documents from the UK that responded to the UK Modern Slavery Act. We're going to run already some open source models, and that's it. It's going to be really straightforward, and we solve the problem. And after a bit over a year and a half or two, we realized that what we were able to do is mainly collect challenges and learnings, and then put forward recommendations that we fed into the development of legislation. And we made all of this available in a publication, but also all the work developed on GitHub. And some of the challenges that we have identified are related about this entire pipeline of data. So first and foremost, because the UK legislation was designed so that companies just put statements on their website, but the government doesn't provide a list each year to say those are the companies that are in scope of the law, it means we don't know what data we need to analyze. So us, as researchers, we needed to estimate what could be the companies that are in scope of the law based on their turnover, and then try to find that information, create the list, go onto their website, scrape all the websites, and we realized we are losing a lot of data by not having this information clarified, but also there are a lot of issues just generally scrapping websites, and also the fact that companies, every time they're publishing a statement, sometimes they're using the same link. So the second year of reporting, all the information of the first year of reporting was lost. So just a huge loss of data just because the law was not designed with data literacy in mind and thinking about how these reports are going to be analyzed. Secondly, a challenge that was very big for us in 2019, is still one today, is that companies are publishing those documents in PDF formats. And not only that, the structure of the PDF is not consistent. Some documents are fully scanned, some others just have the signature page scan, but many of them have very, very interesting infographics that they're presenting because they're writing these documents thinking mainly about the consumers, and they want to see these really interesting maps and figures, but it's very hard for the machines to really understand the complexity of those figures. And once again, there was a lot of very important information that was lost, especially if those figures are not correctly described in text. Thirdly, at that stage, because we are trying to move fast and develop a solution, we thought we can just repurpose data from NGOs that have assessed documents. So the Walk Free Foundation and WikiRate, they've been running this Beyond Compliance project for many years. So they took samples of documents, assessed them with volunteers, and then published the reports. So they're taking just maybe 100 or 200 of documents, and we just asked them for this data. They gave it to us, and when we were trying to teach an AI to replicate this assessment, we realized that this data was very messy because it was never intended for the development of AI. It was just for them internally to keep a record of what the assessment looks like. So for instance, instead of just extracting the text that says this a document is approved by the board, the volunteer assessing will say, I see that on page 5, the board approved this document. And again, that was a lot of noise that was really skewing our results. And finally, as I mentioned, the UK government didn't have an obligation to review this statement. So we're building these solutions a bit in the dark because there was not a clear user that was going to implement this work. So even though they were excited to hear that we're doing this, there was not really a lot of appetite for getting a little bit more involved and getting their hands dirty with this project because they didn't have the incentive. So this is what we've learned, and being at that stage when the Australian Modern Slavery Act was being developed and passed, and other governments were thinking about passing similar legislation, we take all these learnings, we transform them in recommendations for governments to create centralized registries for this data, to ask companies to publish this data in machine-readable formats, and to also make sure that they tell us exactly who is in scope of the law. The government has this information about companies' turnover and everything else that they need to know. For us, it's a bit harder sometimes to get it. So if they just think about these things from the beginning, then the entire infrastructure of data will follow, and then we have great technology that can help us with this. So we make this recommendation. It's really satisfying for us to see that some of the recommendations were taken by some governments. So even if in this first phase of the project, we didn't invent the nice and coolest AI model or create a perfect solution, we feel very happy that we were able to take those learnings and transform them in policy impact. And of course, we put same recommendations for companies to support the government in creating the data infrastructure. And while we're doing this and wrapping up the project, Mila, who is the Quebec Institute of AI, they're based in Canada, they looked at our work, did a review, and they said, okay, there is potential here. If we correct for these learnings, we can really try to improve this work. And as things happen, I got the chance to meet Kerrie and to present this work, and we decided to create this collaboration between Mila and QUT, and we said, okay, let's not move fast and break things, let's do it. Let's do the second phase of the project in a research manner. Let's take our time and do it really well and really showcase the opportunities and limitations of AI in helping us with this problem. And we continue collaborating with some of our previous advisors, but also working very closely with the government here in Australia, which meant that we're not just developing in the dark, we have a clear user, and we engage also with professional technical organizations that are annotating data or software providers that are extracting text from PDFs to try to correct for some of these data limitations, as I mentioned. And what we were able to do, we were able to output 5 papers, 3 of them very technical, 2 of them sitting at the intersection of technology and policy. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you the key takeaway from this paper and showcasing how we approached this second phase of the project and what our contributions were. Our first paper, was called AIMS.au, and it's the largest annotated data set of modern slavery statements in the world today. We realized that we cannot just try to repurpose data that is out there. We needed a really good annotated data set that we're going to use to be able to fine-tune models and really teach them what good compliance look like. So what we've done, we went to the Australian government and we said, let's try to really focus on compliance. So what are the questions that the law are asking? This is what we're going to teach the AI to identify. So we go just at the higher level of compliance. There are 7 mandatory questions that the law are asking companies to report on. They're very general, but we needed to start there and then move to more granular questions. So we spent about 1.5 years working with very diverse experts to build a very clear annotated guideline that then we work with annotators to train them on this. And we have 2 different annotation processes, but in the end, we end up having almost 6,000 documents that we annotate, but because this assessment is at sentence level, we have over 800,000 sentences annotated manually by quite highly skilled annotators. And with this data set, then we were able to fine-tune large language models and to compare their performance with models that are in zero-shot formats, so models that are only using prompts. And we are showcasing through our research that large language models that are just using prompts in zero-shot settings, they are really underperforming compared to a model that is fine-tuned on a very high-quality annotated data set. And I think that was a really important technical contribution to the field, especially in a time when the LLMs are so hyped and people trust them without second thoughts. So we wanted to show that they have a very high limitation when it comes to understanding language that is cleverly written by people in high position as lawyers and marketing experts, so that when somebody reads a modern slavery statement from a business, they can feel like they're hearing enough from business, but this language is still in the vague enough that in case the company is taken to the court, they have space to negotiate. And that means that even us as domain experts, we don't always agree what a sentence really says, let alone a model. So that was our first contribution with this paper. And then we were asked, well, okay, so you've done this for the Australian statements. Now, does the UK government need to spend a year and a half annotating data for them to be able to use AI in assessing their own statements, or similarly the Canadian one? So we test how well our best performing model is able to assess documents from UK and Canada, and we show that it's doing really well at assessing those documents, which means that they don't need to spend that time and money to start from scratch. But also to be able to keep this research competitive, we needed to keep benchmarking our results with improved prompting and improved model. And every new week there is a new LLM out there, and this time it was DeepSeek, and it made the news, and we were under review. I said, okay, well, we're going to bring DeepSeek in as well, and we do the research, and we showcase again that is performing so poorly compared to a fine-tuned model. So we really showcase the value of having good data. But beyond this, in our work, we wanted to always bring ethics and also responsible development of AI, and one important element here is to argue that there should be always a human in the loop. We're never arguing for full automatization of compliance, so we're trying to create explainability models or methods, and that's a bit complicated when you're doing classification with fine-tuned models. So in this paper, we'd also try to bring some of those methods out and to showcase a pathway forward. So when people take these tools or these artifacts that we're developing and try to put them in tools, they're always thinking about the explainability element. Furthermore, we see that even our best performing model was sitting in the 70s in the F1 score. We wanted to bring it up to the 80s, so we tried lots of different techniques to try to improve performance. So we end up with these huge large language models that we keep fine-tuning and tweaking to be better, and then we try to run them all in parallel because each of them was improving one of our limitations. But that was ending up being a very slow and time-consuming and energy-consuming exercise. And we knew that our user was never going to be organization with lots of compute. They're going to be NGOs with zero compute or governments with very little budgets. So we said, okay, well, let's try to distill the knowledge of all these teacher models into a tiny model. And we do that in this paper, and then we showcase that our student model, not only that performs equally or even better than running all these teacher models in parallel, but it does this 7 to 8 times faster and up to 6 times energy saving. And I think this is another important contribution from our side, because now we don't need to go to an NGO and say, just run this huge llama model. You can say, just take this tiny modern bird that we fine-tune, and you can probably run it locally. So those are our technical publications, but we knew that this work is not just a technical work, it's something that hopefully will be implemented in policy. So we now turn to the academics, the civic society, those that have looked at these statements for many, many years, and they say, great work, but we don't just care if the company has ticked the compliance questions. They're very vague, so the law just asks a company to describe any action that they took to mitigate risk, and there could be pages and pages of actions. The academia and civic society, they generally ask a lot more questions, so instead of the 7, they tend to ask 60 questions when they're assessing one document. So we said, okay, so how are we going to move forward, to move from compliance check to quality check? So we went to the literature, we mapped all the studies that we could find that assess Australian or UK statements. We find that about 13 of them have their methodology open, and then we go in and take every single question that they're asking in the methodology when they're assessing a statement. So we end up with about 466 metrics or questions, but of course, same questions appear multiple times. So we have 211 unique questions that we can collect from the literature. And we always map it back to the mandatory criteria of the law. And the reason for that is because we wanted to also provide an automated way that those stakeholders could potentially use our own models to be able to ask those more granular questions. But again, remember, our models are only trained to identify high-level questions of compliance. But because we map those granular questions to the question of compliance, we were able to present this framework. So let's say I am an NGO and I'm curious if the company described migrant workers as a risk of modern slavery. So I have my streamline question here, and then I know that this question is related to question 3 of compliance, description of risk. So I'm going to take a document, split it in sentences, and take our fine-tuned small model and say, extract every sentence that is related to risk description and provide me with 100-word context around this sentence. Then I take all of that as context, and I take a large language model with a prompt and say, all right, this is the evidence we found in the document. Has the company described anywhere that migrant workers are a risk of modern slavery for this company? And then the model can say yes, and also, importantly, it needs to give me the reasoning on how they reached that conclusion. And then that information goes to a human, and the human ultimately decides if the model is right or wrong. But maybe we don't find, our modern bird says, sorry, I can't find any relevant sentences here, or there is an error. So we have a watchdog, a second model, that instead of relying on our modern bird to extract context, it relies on a RAG pipeline that extracts relevant context based on the semantics of the initial question, gives this evidence again to the model does its reasoning, and then it says, also, I didn't find anything, or I actually did find a sentence that your modern bird didn't catch, and this is my reasoning why I think the company has answered that question. And the reason why we really care about this reasoning is because many times the models reach the right answer because they tend to like to please the user, but then you look at the reasoning and it has nothing to do with the question asked in the first place. So it's really important for us to try to correct as much as possible for this question and for humans to have that information to be able to justify their assessment. And finally, once we did that, we said, well, we've learned a lot again, and we know that in this work we only focus on the Australian, UK, and Canada Modern Slavery Act, but remember that slide with so many different legislations already in force that they're looking at human rights and environmental due diligence, and they all have the same issue, that nobody has the resources to assess them. So what do they need to do to be able to have AI assess them? So we create, again, this paper, we collect learnings, recommendations, and explain the AI implication around data collection, data analysis, and the user. And then we create an index where we go through all this law. There are a lot more, but I just screenshot here a few of them. And we showcase how ready they are to have technology applied in their enforcement process and where they need to improve in order to get there. And that was our work. That was what we've done with Project AIMS. And once we did this, of course, we were continuing our input of all these learnings into the review of the legislation. Those laws are not static, they're changing, there are a lot of reviews. We're working really closely here in Australia with the government and with the Anti-Slavery Commissioner to try to really advocate for changes into the infrastructures of this law. We contribute to policy roundtables, so we really try to create this bridge between the really technical world and the domain expertise and the policy world, and to be able to help them understand each other and help them progress together towards better policy. So once we did that, well, Kerrie and I thought, all right, let's make everything open source, the publications, the data, the models, and we're going to take all the data, feed it into our partners. We create platform, which is the largest ESG data repository in the world. And why not invite the world to look at our work and see all the limitations and all the things that we couldn't do well, and then they can hopefully try to improve on them. And we decided to organize this hackathon. So now I'm going to invite Kerrie to tell you a little bit more about this hackathon, and then I'll come back and we can present the winners. Thank you for your attention.
And that is what a PhD looks like. And if that wasn't enough in the PhD itself, then this was Adriana's brainchild to have this hackathon, and as she said, to open the work to the world and to see what else could be done with it and what people would make of it. And so, on top of a PhD then, Adriana's been very active in developing this hackathon. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit about the hackathon. So we've had about, this hackathon was conducted over a number of stages, which I'll explain in a minute, but there were about 50 plus speakers that spoke to sessions before the actual doing of the hackathon itself. And so these speakers have come, as you see, from a large number of countries, and it was really, I think, a testimony to the importance that is placed on this topic and the passion of the people involved in this work. And so these speakers were across the domains of modern slavery, but also then into the AI component as well. There were 220 plus participants in the hackathon that came from across the world. This was an online hackathon, so you can see here the countries that are represented by the participants. There were 50 plus teams and from 19 countries. And so it truly was an international activity. The organisers of the hackathon were QUT, Centre for Data Science, MILA, Pasos Libres, which is a fantastic organisation that organises hackathons and is in this area of modern slavery and other areas for social good. And they were complemented then by a number of knowledge partners. And so these are our knowledge partners in this work. You can see here WikiRate, UNESCO, IRCAI, Walk Free, Mekong Club. We had the University of Sydney, we had the Lancaster University, and so on. You can see a large number of organisations here that were prepared to come on as knowledge partners. And so these knowledge partners presented at the workshop and then also presented, that supported the participants throughout the hackathon. So we have then the phases of the hackathon. So we had a number of days of learning and teaching. This was training, expert talks and workshops. We then had the hacking, which was from the 13th to the 17th of September. And so this was the solution development and the mentoring. And we had the judging. So this was conducted up to just previously. And a number of people internationally were involved in the judging panel. And then we also have the awards, and so that's where we're up to now. So I'd like to now call on, sorry, we're not ready to do that. I'm so keen to get to the part. So this was the agenda you can see here. So we actually had welcome remarks and logistics, and on the first day, we also then had a session on introducing the modern slavery legislation in Australia, Canada, and the UK. And then on the third day, we had another session which was on the responsible and ethical development of AI for good. And then from that, from the hackathon, I'll just mention also that because we had these fantastic presentations from a large range of speakers, we decided that we wanted to be able to present this. The work was recorded, but we wanted to be able to present this in a way that then could be disseminated more widely. And so what we have done, because this really wasn't enough for a PhD project to do all the research and run a hackathon, was to actually then compile this work into a book. And so each of the presentations then was developed, was translated and then, or transcribed, I should say, and then compiled into small chapters, presented back to the authors, and the authors are now then reviewing that work and will be publishing this as an open book. And so we're very excited to see this. It's a fantastic piece of work, and I think a great legacy for the hackathon. And I'd also like to thank Ashara and other members of the Centre for Data Science who've been also supporting the development of this book. In the hackathon then, the participants were encouraged to develop innovative solutions in 4 areas. There was the data processing and enrichment. What could we do better here? How could we extend the work on data processing? There was AI model optimization and exploitability, application and visualization for stakeholder use, and blue sky innovation. Like, what else could be done in this area? And we had great representation from the participants across all of these 4 areas. So that then brings us to, we need a drum roll please everybody, to the awards. Okay, and I will hand over to Adriana to announce the awards.
Super. Thank you, Kerrie. And of course, the spelling mistakes are all mine. Right, so we had 50 teams. They joined us for the first few days, listening to all these different panels, learning about modern slavery. We had business, government, people coming to explain to them the full landscape and the complexities that go behind trying just to produce these statements, analyze them, and enforce this law. And then we asked them to answer at least one of these challenges. And I think this was a little bit different than other hackathons that were run before. At least that's what we hear back from the participants, not only because of the learning, but also the complexity of the challenges that we put out there. And we try to be prescriptive enough so they have enough guidance and materials, but also we were really, really interested in the innovation that they will bring to this project. So we had about 23 really good solutions that were sent to us, out of which we needed to only pick 4. 3. Yeah, we needed to pick 3, a winner and then second and third place. So that was very difficult, and the way Kerrie described it, I'm too soft for this. I couldn't, so then we decided to add one more prize yesterday. So now we're not gonna only have the big winner, but we're also gonna offer 3 prizes for the runner-ups. And on top of that, we realized that there were some teams that really stood out, but they just simply didn't made it to that top 4 places. So we wanted to start the awards with some special recognitions for the teams that didn't make it to the podium, but that they did incredible work. So the first recognitions go to the team Big Milk from the United Kingdom, and the recognitions goes to them because they had a really strong consideration and focus on consumer. So they really tried to put consumer at the center. They were looking into the blue sky innovation part of the challenge, and they created this really great idea of having a plugin on a website. So when you are already on a company's website, you can look on this plugin and it gives you all this incredible information about the company. So they did really well, and we wanted to recognize them for this. The second recognitions go for Justice Miners. They're based in Colombia, and while their solution, again, didn't make it to the podium, they did so well at documenting their code and practices, and the judges really appreciated that. They went to the GitHub and everything was very clear, and you can really tell that they put a lot of effort into building their solution. So we really wanted to recognize that, because I think it's really important to showcase your work in a very professional manner and very clear. So the judges wanted to make sure we give them a shout out for that. We also have TSU Montreal, they're based in Canada, and they really focus their solution on that explainability part of our challenge too. So as I mentioned before, we do want to find different ways in which we can help the human reviewers to understand why the model decides what it decides. So then they really showcased some really interesting methods here and made their solution stand out for that reason. There was another team based here in Australia called Chainbreaker, and they built the most interesting interface. It was a beautiful application. The pitch looked incredible, and unfortunately the back end was not as strong to be on the podium, but we need to get to know them and understand how they're building this, and maybe we wanted to recognize the incredible work that they put in there and really teach us how to create these incredible applications and visualizations. So that's why we wanted to award them for that with a special recognition. Finally, we also have PolyML from Canada. And similarly, they were doing presenting a solution for the Blue Sky Innovation Challenge, and they really emphasized on one of the limitations that the governments and others were pointing to this entire project, which is we always look at only what companies are telling us in this statement, but is there a way to compare what a company says in their statement with other information from the media or from the internet about this company, so we can actually start now checking if what they're saying is true. And one first step there is to look at the news. And this is what this team did. They tried to look at embedding news into the assessment of the statement analysis. So we wanted to recognize them for this work. Okay, Kerrie, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Now, we would love to...
For the three, oh no, sorry, four.
Yeah. So we're going to start with the runner-ups, and just to a final clarification, when we compare the solutions, we didn't look what challenge the solution is trying to answer. We assess everyone the same way. We have over 6 or 7 judges assessing each solution. We had at least 3 technical judges and 3 domain experts looking at the solutions. So we not only make sure that the solutions are impactful and responding to stakeholder needs, but they're technically sound. So we had people go to their GitHub and dig through the code and were able to identify if the back end of the code supports the beautiful visualizations that they're showing us. So we take this into account, and then we realize that the winners are actually also the top winners within each challenge. So we can actually recognize everyone, at least one team from each challenge, but that was not our intention. That was not a metric of assessment, just clarifying that mainly for the teams when they're going to have lots of questions about this. So let's go. So the first runner-up and the best team in Challenge 1 for data mining, processing, and enhancement are Team Synapse from Cameroon and Kenya. They built an incredible solution. They went to each of the challenge pillars. We had different pillars that we were asking them to answer to, and they answered every single pillar from the challenge. They did it well, they documented well. Everybody was very impressed, and that's why they are one of our runner-ups. The second runner-up and the best team in Challenge 2, AI model optimization and explainability, goes to the Due Diligence, who are based here in Australia at Monash University, and one of their colleagues is in India. And they, once again, look at the challenge, understood it, provide a great answer. They not only use models that in Zero Shot to like the GPTs with prompts, but they're also integrated our modern BERT in their application, made sure that everything is explainable. A user can understand exactly each sentence that justifies a prediction. So they did really well, and that's why they're getting a prize. And the third runner-up for the and the best in Challenge 3 application visualization and stakeholder use, they are Firefly, they are from South Africa, and they also have a member from Australia. And their pitch was they really impressed the judges, and they built this beautiful application, once again answering every single requirement of the challenge, and something that we hope to see hopefully being implemented one day by some potential stakeholders. So they did really well, and we want to congratulate them for that. And the big winner of this competition, and also the best in Challenge 4, the Blue Sky Innovation, is the team Commit Hop from South Africa with one member from the US.
Tell us about them.
So the Commit Hop, they decided to not only answer one challenge, but to try to take pieces of each different challenges and build a more comprehensive solution, and to think about reinventing the way the process of assessing compliance go by not asking to the companies to publish the statements, but to complete their statements on this platform and then generate all the rest of the assessment from there, which some judges didn't like that much because they thought, well, why do we ask helping companies to add information already here? Maybe they're going to use AI and then we have AI assess them. But this is not a process that is new. In fact, the governments, all of the of them, the UK, Australia, and Canada, they're looking at having templates that the companies can use automatically to fill this information on their website. So they have paid a very close attention, maybe, as I said, even better than some of the judges, in understanding in that workshop what the government is looking at doing next, and they try to provide a solution for that. But let not me try to explain what they did, but I'll rather show you their pitch. It's about 5 minutes. So as part of the hackathon, the teams also had access to experts that teach them how to build a pitch. So they knew they had to not only give us a demo, but also a 5-minute pitch of their solution. So we can show you the video of their own pitch, and then you can see for yourself. Let's see if this works.
Hi there, I'm Jadaya, and I will commit help. I've answered the Blue Sky Innovation Challenge, Challenge 4. But here's the thing. I've woven together elements from all the challenges into one cohesive solution. You'll see Challenge 1's data quality improvements, Challenge 2's AI explainability, and Challenge 3's stakeholder visualization, all working together in harmony. Let me show you what I've built. Commit Hope completely reimagines modern slavery compliance. Instead of wrestling with documents after they're created, I've built a platform where structured data flows from creation to transparency. Now, here's the game changer. Companies don't upload PDFs. They create statements directly through our platform. The international reporting template guides each and every step, capturing structured data from the very beginning. This solves Challenge 1's data quality problem. We eliminate OCR errors entirely and achieve a 95% storage reduction. That's 500 kilobyte PDFs down to 25 kilobytes of searchable, easily formattable JSON. Let's take a look at what happens after submission. Our AI engine provides exactly what Challenge 2 requires: explainable AI. Every assessment includes confidence scores, chain of thought reasoning, and evidence classification. The AI doesn't just say, the score is 7 out of 10. It explains why, linking specific text to international template reporting requirements. and crucially, keeping the human in the loop throughout our review workflow. Speaking of human validation, I've taken a page out of GitHub's playbook. Statements enter a collaborative review process where external experts validate AI assessments, add comments, and ensure accuracy. This transformed compliance from a solitary checkbox exercise into a community-driven effort for transparency. And here's where Challenge 3 stakeholder visualization comes alive. Every assessment, every review, every data point feeds into a public transparency portal. Companies can be searched, ranked, and compared. The Insights page shows industry trends and benchmarks. Civil society gets structured data instead of scattered PDFs. Investors can compare compliance at a glance. Workers' voices become visible through accessible data. And because transparency requires accessibility, all data can be easily exported with just the click of a button. Researchers, NGOs, absolutely anybody can be granted tiered access to analyze the data. Fighting modern slavery requires us to rethink our entire approach, not just optimize existing programs. It's unfortunately clear that simply is just not enough. And so, what can we do except redesign the whole ecosystem? In this way, we eliminate the core problem entirely. By controlling the input format, we're removing PDF parsing challenges completely. The 95% storage reduction isn't just about efficiency. It means faster access for organizations in low bandwidth regions. The multi-challenge integration creates a network effect. Better data quality from challenge 1 enables better visualization for challenge 3, while challenge 2's explainable AI builds trust that drives adoption. Now, this isn't theoretical. The platform is live at commithope.org, ready to create and process real statements for real companies. When we make compliance data structured from creation, when AI explains every decision it made that let it come to the conclusion that it drew up, when transparency becomes truly accessible and centralized, we create ripple effects. Companies improve when they see their competitors' progress. Capital flows towards responsible businesses. Advocacy becomes targeted and effective. This is how we make the invisible visible, the complex accessible. Let's commit to hope.
Excellent. So, this is it. This is us. Now we know the winners, and we have about 30 minutes for discussion. We're really curious to hear if you have any questions for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Let's give her another round of applause. Well done. Right, I have a mic. Would anybody like to ask any questions?
Thank you, Kerrie. Thank you, Adriana. What an incredible suite of work. Congratulations. It's an insane amount of things to have done during your PhD. Really impressive. I have a couple of questions, but maybe I'll just ask one and come back and hold the mic some more later. I guess my first one is about, in the hackathon, interested to know the scope of what you're thinking in terms of documenting in the book. It's really cool to see in this winning solution, like the platform that they built in a week hackathon is pretty insane. Like, and I think it'd be really cool to. It's the sort of thing that seems like it would have a lot of appetite and use cases more broadly within the community here around fair data. I think there's been a lot of discussion around, you know, acquisition, for instance, of metadata and interoperability, framework compliance in standardized formats is something that is really hard to do well, and there's a lot of appetite for user-friendly tools to make those affordances. So like, are you thinking, do you know if the team is planning to, or as part of the book that you're putting together, to document what that workflow was, to kind of put that tool together, and the thinking around how you might make that something that you could offer up to as a process, I guess, to build that, because it seems like something which there's so much need for, and which there would be a lot of appetite to apply to a variety of different use cases.
Thank you for your question, and it's lovely to see you. You've done incredible work as well, so it's really exciting to see you again. And I think with the book, we decided with the authors that we want to keep the book towards, to design it towards a non-expert audience. So our audience for the book will be people similar of those that joined the hackathon. So those that are interested in this topic, they might be technologists or there might be domain experts, but they want to learn a little bit more about either the domain or the technology. So we make the book in two different parts, but we're trying to address an audience that is just curious about the topic and they want to see an interesting case study of technology and domain experts coming together and putting outputs there into the world. So that's the intention with the book, and we're just planning to mention briefly the solutions, but not necessarily go to that level of depth in this book. That being said, we do have one of our knowledge partners. They're running impact reports for projects and sustainability, and they are offering us a pro bono services. So what they're doing now, they're going to run the impact report of this event, of the hackathon, and as part of that there will be surveys and interviews with the participants, so they will get a chance to talk a little bit closer with the winning team, and maybe that will be a way to record it. Finally, in terms of the next steps, well, what we're trying to do now, and one of the things we're discussing with the authors of this book, which were also the presenters in the hackathon and the judges, so the community pretty much behind this event, was to ask how can we help those teams move forward so this doesn't just become another GitHub repository and an interesting video on YouTube. So we cannot promise anything at this stage, but as Kerrie was saying, we are just announcing the winners for the first time now. After this, we're going to do all the proper communication and reach out to the teams and just try to gauge if they're even interested in collaborating forward. And if they are, because some of them maybe they just did it for their CV, they've done it, they're moving to the next project, but some of them might be interested in creating a collaboration, and then will be on us to try to see if we can get funding and we can get some opportunities. So the leads that we're having now is that some of those stakeholders, some of the governments and NGOs, they say they would be interested in supporting the winning teams. We just need to spend the next couple of days to figure out if something can materialize and where can we get the funding to do that, because they're already putting kind. Of course, the winning team will be, I think, generously recompensated for their work, but we wouldn't want to ask them to do this for free. So we'll see if we can arrange for something like this. And once we do, hopefully we can keep bringing learnings back to those interested.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Great question and great response. Any other questions? Comments?
Oh yeah, hi everyone, my name's Owen. I did my PhD with Kerrie here at QUT as well. And now I work at CSIRO doing statistics in ecology research. I was interested as well, oh yeah, just briefly to respond to that's awesome, and I would really love to see any resources on, like I've been having conversations around how can you think about workflows to build really like user-centric affordances around standardized reporting for things like metadata and interoperability. And I think that the fact that this team of 4 people spun this up in a week is amazing, and their website's incredible. Like it seems like they're really committed to the longevity of that project, not to treat it as a tick and flick hackathon on the CV, but it seems like they're really invested in their solution, so that's cool to see. And a testament to your incredible organization and pursuit of those partnerships to bring together that event and to have outputs of that quality is, it's amazing. So incredible work. I also had a question more on the technical side around your experience with using LLMs in the context of, I guess, quality checking or compliance checking. I don't have experience with the sort of workflows you've described in terms of fine-tuning. Mine has mainly been with off-the-shelf, like big tech company models via API. In my experience, my sense with, when it comes to your accuracy scoring, comparing LLM-generated ratings versus human-generated ratings, in my experience, it's that you can kind of trust the LLM output to maybe broaden and catch things that you may not have caught or been able to do at scale through manual screening. But in my experience, it's harder to trust a negative as a true negative from LLMs. That and I guess there's also like a differential risk downside of like a false positive versus a false negative in terms of like missing things that might not have been in there or truly saying that something wasn't in there that actually was. Yep. So can you comment a bit on like what your thinking has been like and what your experience is on that side of things, how you get the like accuracy comparison between human rating and LLM generated ratings, and whether that's something you've grappled with in terms of whether or not you're treating something as a true negative, or the extent to which you can trust that from LLM generated ratings.
Thank you, and that's a really good question, because that was maybe one of the most time-consuming part of this work, and the reason why it took us so long to get the first part, the data, done, and then just had a year to do all the publications and everything. And on one hand, the fact that we took this approach of investing so heavily on the data, which was a deliberate approach, it also meant that we made our life a bit easier later when we did the research. So by spending so much time annotating data sets and creating this large data set, but also on top of that, we also had a gold data set and to test and validate, and those were experts. So there were just like 4 of us that only did 50 documents, but the amount of time we spent on annotating those documents until we got to a point where we say, okay, this will be the testing. This is the absolute gold truth. That means that we really trusted that when the model predicts a negative, we don't need to go back to the original document to check if they actually didn't miss any information, because it's really easy later on to check for positives, especially when you're asking them for the reasoning, if you use the zero-shot model, but then if they miss something, then how do you check without having to go to the original document? And that's really time-consuming, and then it kind of goes against the whole pipeline or the argumentation that we're making that AI is going to make the analyst's life easier. And that's why in this last paper we added a watchdog agent that we say that is very likely that our model will miss some relevant information. Let's try to control that by adding a different model that will do another scan based on a different methodology, so we increase our chances. And I'm sure that we can keep adding, I don't want to name that agentic because that's not really what we want to do in any way, but we can keep adding different agents and try to control as much as possible for those limitations until we hope to provide enough confidence to the user that no relevant information was missed in the evidence that was given to the model. So I think there's not a very straightforward, easy fix for that, and you always need a lot of human error analysis. So a lot of my role in this PhD was to do annotations from day one until the last day. I'm still annotating documents now, and I'm still doing error analysis of some documents for some reviews of the paper. So that work never ends because we really need to showcase results as accurately as possible, and it takes still a lot of human review to do that. I hope that answered your questions, but those were some of the techniques we used to mitigate for this really clear risk, which is the false negatives and the time needed to review them.
That's such a cool
Thank
resource
you.
to have that fully annotated data set for other projects. It's amazing. So
Yes, thank you.
Just to open the floor to that question then, does anybody else have any comments, experience in that area that they'd like to share? Working on that? Okay, would anybody like to ask any other questions? Please.
Yeah, well, my name's Ian Bruno. My normal area of work is crystallography, science, etc. So this is all very new, and I don't really do AI anyway, but yeah, it's been fascinating to get an insight into how people are using AI to probe these real-world issues. And you've talked a lot about the challenges of getting the information that's being mandated through the legislation in order to be able to process it by AI. Could you say a bit more about what sort of insights and outcomes it's sort of starting to reveal from what chance you've had to actually look at it about the effectiveness of this legislation, and whether there's anything that then feeds back into how the legislation needs to be improved?
Yes, so with these questions that you're asking is the question that all these academics and civic society researchers been asking since this law has been enforced, the ones that we mapped through literature and tried to extract their methodology. So what I'm going to answer is actually some of the results that came out from their work, because they've been looking at this for a while. So maybe one of the main takeaway from assessing UK and Australian statements was that as companies realized that nobody's really having the time to assess their documents, the document from year 3 looked identical with the document from year 2 and the document from year 1. So each year they're just copy and pasting the same thing because they know they're not going to be analyzed. Of course, there are a few exceptions. One, if you are an IXX 100 company, a lot of people pay attention, or if you're a public-facing company like a garment or some of these industries that are now a bit under scrutiny by the news. So they will be paying a little bit more attention. But if you're a construction company, or people will not decide to walk or not on your roads depending on what modern slavery policy you have. So we see a lot of differences between different industries on how they're approaching their reporting, and this idea that if nobody is watching, we'll be fine to keep copying, pasting the same information. Then a lot of advocacy went into this, and then one other important aspect is that the advocacy part is saying to companies, if you are finding a case of modern slavery in your supply chain, please report it. And that means that you are showing us that you're really understanding the risk that you're having. If you are a company with a turnover of 100 million a year, which are the ones that are in scope of this law, so only really large corporations are meant to report under this law, you will have risk of modern slavery. Saying you have zero risk of slavery means you haven't even started reviewing what modern slavery is and how it looks in your supply chain. But more importantly, once you have done that process and you go beyond tier 1 suppliers further, most likely you're going to find either very high risk or at times incidents of modern slavery. And we want to know, and that's a really good reputational thing for the company to do, because they're showing us they've done the right thing, and then they're showing us how they remediated that case. So if they say, sorry, we just stopped contracts, that's really bad. If they say, we help the family find better solutions and have a more sustainable lifestyle, then that's the best reputational or marketing or PR package that they can get. But of course, the companies don't think like this. So they say in some of those roundtables that we do under the Chatham House rule, they will be very open and they say, we have identified modern slavery, we've been remediating, we've done a lot of work with families. We would never put it on our statement. We just think consumers and even media are just not educated enough to understand this philosophy. We understand it as a business, we just don't think the public is ready for that. So then it comes back to us as advocates to create this advocacy and to say, by the way, if H&M says that they found slavery, is just a hypothetical example, don't penalize them, it's good. They're doing the right thing, work with them, and so on. So those are just a few examples that came to my mind just now. But imagine what we can do now when we're not just looking at the top 100 companies or the same companies that are always being scrutinized, but with the use of AI and these wonderful platforms, we can scale this transparency to all the reports that are being submitted each year, and we start to have this longitudinal assessment and all these things that this data and these graphs that then, by this ability for the advocates to just download, they will be able to use them in their reports and create more impactful advocacy moving forward. So that's what we're hoping to do. Take the work from the civic society and just scale it. But we're not inventing the methodologies. We're just building on their knowledge and bring the technology to exponentially increase it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Owen, a quick one. No, I'm not saying don't ask it. I'm just saying, yeah, just in terms of time.
My sense is that there can be some cases where I'm doing a bad job at asking this question quickly already. Thinking about, for instance, cobalt mining in the Congo, my sense is that like there's incentives in lower and middle income countries where a lot of modern slavery might be happening in the supply chain, that there's kind of like medium scale aggregators who somehow sanitize the, like they call it like clean cobalt, and it's coming into like a local regional supplier who's then supplying like Tesla and Apple and big companies over there. So like, I guess linking to that sort of scenario where a lot of the legislative frameworks that you're looking at are in like Western companies where I guess like the manufacturing might be happening that are quite far upstream in the supply chain. Do you have thoughts on like where do you think the leverage points that need to be pushed are in terms of like the policy landscape, and what do you see going forward in terms of like points of intervention in countries which might not have as much in terms of the legislation and commitment to compliance at the moment, like just to speak to where you see that going in the next few years and what you think should be happening in those directions.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So the reason why I wanted to put this up, so this is the agenda of the hackathon, and as you see, there were lots of different sessions that we had, and some of them were bringing in the business perspective. So we're asking these corporations to go in their supply chain and to try to create this transparency, and we say, well, it's your responsibility, it must be easy. And they're saying, what are you talking about? We have examples in this hackathon from Sydney University, a university, a huge procurement entity. They're procuring everything from cadavers for medical research to solar panel and everything in between. They need to do risk assessment, and they need to move beyond tier 1 suppliers all the way to the raw material, right? Including cobalt if they're using technology and so on. So this is the requirements, and this is the reality where businesses are today. They say, let us just at least start mapping our supply chain. But then, of course, there are other organizations like DigiNext and a few other of the speakers that their job is to help companies to create that transparency and to be able to move with technology down to their supply chain. And they are inventing some really interesting methods to track that from raw material to the final product, and to be able to, for instance, through genetic mapping of the fibers of the cotton, they are able to spot where those middle entities that are trying to wash the provenience of the raw material and to the final business. So because of this really cool technology and the blockchain as well, they're able to identify these interventions in the tracking of the products and the services that are at risk of being made with slavery. And that's a really good example, for instance, for another law, an import ban that is passed in the US, that are saying any product that comes from the Xinjiang region of China is not allowed to come to the country. So the company now has an obligation to figure out that nothing from tomatoes, cotton, solar panels, all those really big products that are at risk, that are manufactured there, are not entering the US. But they're not going straight from China to the US. They tend to go to somewhere in Southeast Asia. And then here there is a lot of potential for like cleaning that data and looking as they're clean. But then this is how those organizations are trying to support businesses in doing this transparency right. So to move from these clear examples of how businesses are trying to tackle this challenge to further looking at the policies, what we see is that here in Australia and beyond, there is a push now to not just rely on these transparency laws, the Modern Slavery Acts, but to move towards mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence laws, which means that now the burden is not on the consumer to read the statements and check if the transparency is good enough and so on to make informed decisions, or the investors, but is on the businesses to prove that they have done their due diligence. It's mandatory due diligence. So they will need to prove that the actions and everything they're describing in their statements is backed by evidence. And that's the directions where we're going to. There is a lot of lobbying, especially in Europe now, starting against it, because they were the one leading this work. But even here in Australia, we are working closer with the commissioner to push in that direction. So maybe Australia will become the leader in this, if Europe is not. So those are a few thoughts that I have on that question. Kerrie, you have to take me out of this stage because I can speak for a long time.
Thank you, and they're fantastic questions, and it's a very complicated issue as to actually what constitutes modern slavery as well, and so some organisations that are trying to do good things, but then the optics might be that they are actually participating in modern slavery means that they won't undertake those activities as well. So I've got some examples on that, but that might be for another time. So I will bring this session to a close. Thank you very much. There have been some fantastic discussions, some great questions, and I really appreciate the interaction. I'm going to ask us to thank Adriana again for a great presentation and also for her work on the hackathon, and also a great round of applause for the winners of the hackathon as well. And lastly, thank you to you for participating in this session. Okay, I'll bring it to a close.